So it's been a few days now since we got the last video out about the X1 2024 build and how everything was going. Luckily, I made it back to the track this week, hoping to put down a lot of test laps and get used to the car. But after I put the car in the hands of some people that are a little bit more knowledgeable than I am, we found a few issues. So I'm going to go over a few of them here and talk about what's going to be happening tomorrow. So I am Chad. This is the Dorky and 40 RC channel. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about F1. Now, first mistake that we made, of course, we did make some assembly errors, and watching back the race video from last week, I could kind of tell, now that I know what the problem is, that you can see the car is not really behaving correctly. It wasn't consistent. I know driving, it wasn't easy to drive. It wasn't difficult to drive. It kind of came back and forth, but I knew that something really wasn't right. But I was really honestly too busy shaking and trying not to kill it. So let's take a look at the first big mistake I did. If you look up here in my browser, you'll see that I have X1 2024 manual, and right beside that I have the X12 2023 manual. One thing I could think of is during my build session while looking at things is that I kind of got my pod spacing here, the shims and stuff, incorrect. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, underneath these pan cars here, this whole chassis of course is connected by this little pod in here, and there's like a little ball stud that goes into like a receiver. And depending upon how you space this out and all that kind of stuff, kind of creates the difference between front and rear traction. Now, what I actually did was I left a spacer out. So my pod was basically going back and forth, and it was not stuck into the receiver all the way. And that was a big build mistake. So you combine that with the crash that I had and everything else, we had some problems. So when I went up Tuesday, yes, I did end up taking a day off of work to go and race this thing, at least practice with it, but thank goodness I did, so I could get everything sorted out for tomorrow. Do plan on trying to run this tomorrow. There's going to be that day where it's like, you know, you only get to race so much, and who knows, one day we may all be gone and never be able to race again. So I don't really want to run 3 classes, but I think, you know, the TTO2 is a no-brainer. We just charge it and go. This is obviously going to take a little bit of work as far as like keeping things tight, prepping tires, things like that, charging the battery, and hopefully the same thing with the GT12, because I really want to run that too, because I got to practice with it a little bit and it was running good. So we got the whole pod situation out. The ball stud was tweaked. There was a bad screw, that was bent, and, all because I left out that spacing. So when I held the pod like this and the whole frame upside down, there was a definite noticeable gap here that was going on between one side to another. And I think it ended up being one of the screws was bent that goes into like these aluminum blocks that the side links go into. So we got that sorted out. The tire gluing situation, you can see how much nicer those look on the fronts now, all the way up to the beads. So that should help everything out with that. Tires are breaking in a little bit more. The other thing that we needed to do was I did immediately put in a way softer spring that everybody is running up there. And when I did that, it really increased the amount of droop to an unnecessary level, probably around 2.2 to 2.4 millimeters of front droop that I was running with. And it's a lot. Really didn't notice it. Again, just excited, wanting to run the car. Always want to try to take your time with this stuff and not rush into things. And it's not really what I wanted to do last week. But when I threw it down and I got it around the track, I was like, all right, it's now or never. Let's just do it. And of course, we know what happened. Doing some shimming, a whole lot of shimming. The front kingpin design on this thing is definitely not as cool as my Xray GT12, the X12 2023, that has like these built-in kingpins for your camber angle, and then you just kind of add shims and you just like close it all up on top with a screw, and everything is super simple. This thing, you've got 4 different places to stack all of these shims, and really the spring part, at least here in the bottom, I didn't have to do nothing with because my ride height is pretty good. But when you start adding and taking away spacers underneath the steering arm, above the steering arm, and then on top of the actual full arm, then things get a little crazy. And you got Eclipse. I hate Eclipse. Anybody who says that they're amazing with Eclipse is just full of shit. You're always going to break them. You're always going to lose them. They're going to fly across the room. There's definitely a few of them around this room somewhere that I'm sure I will never find again. So finally, I was able to get some help and figure out the right place to actually put the shims in the right process to set the right height, add the shims, so that way I've got the appropriate amount of droop. It still might be a little too much. It's around a millimeter. Pretty much people say anywhere between like a millimeter and 0.5 in the front, and then we've got 1 millimeter in the back, which that was never, it was kind of an issue because everything was all out of whack anyway, just the way that stuff was built. So I went through that process a lot. I literally spent like probably a couple hours trying to get that thing ready. But the car is all back together. Every screw is straight. Everything has been checked. We've got our mesh set. Everything is pretty much ready to go. And I'm overly excited about it. I spent a bunch of time. I got some organizing containers that go inside some bigger containers. Comes with labels and stuff, so I've been going through and reorganizing and relabeling like all my parts containers for the X12 and the F1 car, so that way everything can be like separated out and easily accessible, and I'm not fumbling around for stuff. Now there's a lot of like parts, screws, bolts, nuts, and spacers that kind of cross over between the cars, pinions, whatever. So it's pretty nice to like have all that stuff. And then the stuff that I had like a lot of like extras on, I kind of divided up and put that into their own bigger containers. So that way I can just have the X1 container here and the X12 container there, and then we'll be all good and ready to go. Definitely couldn't do it without the help of my buddies OG Bo and Scott, and of course Mr. Wayne Gerber for helping me out over the phone with a couple things. So, you know, we're ready to go. Hopefully we will have we'll definitely have a lot of fun. Hopefully we won't break anything or shed any tears, and I think everything will be good. So I guess the lesson learned from this video is always reach out for help, power through your situations, and triple check your instructions and make sure that you're not on the same page. I probably should have like got a little, you know, notice in my brain should have went off when I saw Alexander Hagberg on one of the pages when I was actually building this car. But who knows how many times I went back and forth. But I did go through everything again because I literally had to rip this thing pretty much all apart except for the front end. Well, I had to do that for the droop, but in order to get everything all realigned and all back together. So we'll see how the racing goes tomorrow. You guys will have some video for that. If we do any changes tomorrow, I doubt it, but we'll see how it goes. And, you know, we're working off of a pretty basic setup sheet that the guys have been working on that are definitely ahead of me by, you know, 5-6 months. So we'll see how fast we can catch them. You know, no hurry. I have no problem with just turning laps and enjoying the car. Now we should be able to actually turn laps and not fight for laps. But for some reason, I like to hit walls, but that's all good. So we'll talk to you guys later. Love you all. Peace.